the main idea is that when we get to open up about these things, when everyone gets a chance to open up about them, then we become more flexible in our thinking about it. And you asked for some examples. Did you want to give an example?
Well, one of the examples in my class, we're a class essentially almost 50-50 with people of color and white people. And I realized that in coming to the class, since we are working on this exact issue in our class, one of the patterns that I had in the class was to kind of caretake for people of color, feeling like, oh, I need to sort of like go after them, or somehow like as if I need to like as if like they couldn't take care of themselves or something, right?
No, that's not
one
color.
big.
That's just somebody who's a victim of anything.
Well, that's what I realized. My big realization was my big realization was basically that that actually is not useful in our relationship. If our relationship is one human being to another, it's so. And I had to work on those feelings though first. I had to kind of like use those techniques of listening back and forth with that person, with other white people, with people of color, in order to realize that sort of.
I can give an example also. There was a woman at work who I always felt like she didn't like me, and I was insecure around her, and she happens to be black. And I would just think that, oh, she doesn't like me because I probably did something offensive, I probably said something, did something that I don't even realize, and she probably doesn't like me. Meanwhile, I was feeling like she doesn't like me. So she was feeling like she didn't get, I was kind of felt, I would be pulling back from her a little bit, because I wouldn't be very friendly because I was feeling intimidated by her, thinking she doesn't like me. So then I started to work on that. Outside of work, I would talk about how it made me intimidated, and screw her if she doesn't like me, whatever. I would get angry about it. I would get some feelings out about it, and then I would get to the point where, in my own thinking and my own working it out in my mind, I realized maybe this is. She was nice to me yesterday. I guess I forgot about that, and then kind of little by little realized it was not coming from her. It was coming from me, and so my insecurity about her was what was perceived as racism, because I was the one who was pulling back. I wasn't pulling back because I didn't like her or because of her color, but because I was so afraid of my own racism that I was afraid she already hated me, and it became this whole complicated thing of that had nothing to do with anything. It was based on.
How did you find out that it started from you? You spoke to her.
When I worked on it on my own, then I made the decision that I didn't. That I mean, when I was able to work on it on my own and sort of unravel all those things that were going on in my brain, I was able to notice that she was perfectly nice to me. She would respond when I was friendly. But before I could work it out, I mean, he was asking for an example of something that I worked on. Before I worked on it, I was so caught up in my own mind and convinced that she hated me that only I could tell when she was a little cold or when she wasn't friendly, right?
When you feel something with another person, it's usually not only one person. It's usually like a
right,
circularity.
because when I would be,
but you're like taking all the responsibility of attention, and I don't know.
Let me change
that might be.
No, let me
That might be more of the same.
Right. When I started to be insecure about it, so I would start to back up, and she would detect that, and she would back up. But by backing up, I mean like being a little cold, and then
Decided
when
that
I
you started.
I made the first step.
How do you know?
But then, you know what? Because it doesn't matter. Possible.
What I'm saying, first she has to work on feelings of feeling bad about herself, Nikki.
One second, let me just jump in here a second. Maybe it's just irrelevant. Maybe the point here is that racism doesn't have to be this big, huge hammer when you're smacking somebody over the head. Maybe it's much, much more subtle. and then a little thing here, a reaction to a reaction, a perception of a perception. And if you just stop,
Right.
and it doesn't make a difference who starts it and where it's coming from.
Why am I asking? I'm not asking who started. I'm saying the whole racist thing. If she was just a white person, right? Would you have been so quick to say all the tension started from you? I think even your analysis here is still smacking of that distinction. And it's just two people. When there's tension between two people,
For sure, there are
little
other things
bits of
that can-
everything that's starting it, and
Sure,
it becomes
there are other-
circular.
there definitely
There was a
are.
racist component, but
Well,
who knows?
there are
what-
other things that definitely get in the way. In that scenario, I, on my part, I realized that it was, in my mind, connected to race because I figured that I
And
probably
maybe
did
in her
something
mind too,
wrong
in
and
some
then
way.
in my
And
mind.
Pesh also
She's not immune, is the point. It's racist to assume that any race is immune to racism.
Right.
That's my point.
By the way,
Actually, I would like
So
to,
all
may I say something? May I add something in the whole-
Yeah, okay.
I just realized for myself that this conversation is bringing up a lot of feelings. And I think that what I was feeling was there was a discussion that was going on here about a different layer of the same reality. And the layer that I was feeling was just the discomfort. And I could give words to it, like I think that for you, my senses, and this could be a projection of me, that there's this feeling like it's not okay to disagree with a definition about racism. Or it's not okay to have all the feelings that people were having in this room. There were all kinds of feelings, a lot of defensiveness, and that it's not okay. And I think that this is a process, and I think it's amazing that you brought it here. I really do. I really do. It's impressive. But I think it's important to understand that a lot of this is just chatter, and it's like all the fears. Thank you. Am I talking too long?
No.
Okay. Just all the fears that it brings up. I mean, there's all kinds of shit. Excuse me. That's that's flying all over the place, and I just realized, and I think that for me is the most valuable realization from the whole thing.
Okay, so that's great. That's
Well said, Yossi guys.
Actually, we wanted to say that we didn't know it was going to be such a big group. We actually had anticipated maybe doing the 2-minute thing that we did, the 2 minutes of listening. Each person gets to kind of like
one at a time,
hold
and
the
we would
stick
all listen
and
to
talk, kind of like the old Native
Round
American
robin.
talking stick kind of thing. And we had anticipated that we know it was going to be such a big group, and if we do this again in the future, we'll probably want to open it up to just doing that. So.
Right. And then everybody we could introduce a more subtle listening techniques and also the opposite of getting to the bottom of your
Working on those feelings, exactly that Yossi so beautifully just said.
So thanks.
Thank you. A famous story with Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He became the representative of the UN, and he gave a speech berating a number of African countries and their regimes. And all the Western Europeans started screaming, saying, hey, you can't say that. And the representative of the African country was very happy. Finally, somebody is not treating us as kids. And I think so they're not treating us as children. That you can go plunder your countries, you can go do whatever you want, but nobody's going to say anything because then it's racist.
Right.
Well, you're treating us like adults who have to be responsible.
Right,
And
and
have
so
to have fiscal
that in itself was a racism.
Yes, of course.
To treat that they were being treated as different.
Yes,
Right,
exactly.
and that was my less well expressed point about how much you were quickly able to wanting to take responsibility for the tension between you and this black woman.
Right.
And that was that, but I just didn't express it.
So I think what you were saying, the whole thing that you were saying was something that is much more subtle than just the big boogeyman of racism, which is very, very out there. No, it could be very subtle.
Right, and my
May I offer
point,
that?
yeah, let me just one more thing is that, one more thing, the point of doing, when I said that I was doing the work, is that I finally realized that. I was like, oh, that's what's going on. Okay, and I was growing up and I was only able to realize this when I was able to talk it over and talk it out.